Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special author chat with my friend Cari. And tonight is part of our family reading challenge. So I have got a middle grade author who I cannot wait to introduce you guys to. For those of you who don't know, we do have a family reading challenge going on in the month of December. So if you're not already part of it, there is a Facebook group, and I will drop that link in the show notes. I always call them show notes. I know that's not what you're supposed to say for YouTube. Sorry, guys. I'm used to the podcast world. Anyway, you will have access to the link for that. And I hope you will join us. We have got all sorts of fun things, including a big prize to give out at the end, which is a $30 gift card to bookshop.org. Bookshop.org supports local independent bookstores, which Cari and I are big fans of. And so it is a fantastic way to buy your books. And we have games and all sorts of family nights in a post and other fun things going on. So I hope you guys can join us there for that. And now I am going to jump right in and say welcome, Cari. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
No, thank you, Joy, for inviting me. I'm really excited.
Yay, I'm so excited. So will you please introduce yourself and also tell us a little bit about your book, which is right here behind me.
Sure. So my name is Cari Galeziewski. This is my debut novel, middle grade adventure. It has time travel, pirates, riddles and clues and a portal and all kinds of fun things in it. I have 4 kids. My husband and I, we have been here in Louisiana for 13 years, but I'm originally from Michigan, and I'm missing the snow right now in December, but that's okay. We love family time. We, much like you, Joy, I know that you spend a lot of time with your family. We play board games, we play music together, we watch movies together. We just really enjoy each other's time. So yeah, family time is important to us. But I also love to read, as you know, and I know you do too. So in my sweet spot is kids' books. I just, the gamut from picture books, up to YA. So yeah, I just love to read when I have time. And the book, you wanted me to tell you a little bit about the book too.
Yeah,
so I did the school visit today, which you knew about, and it went really well. And I told them, or I actually asked them a question. I said, how long do you think it took me to write this book? And it was so funny, Joy. They were guessing like 2 to 3 months and, 8 months, and very few of their answers were over a year. I think one person guessed 2 years. And so when I told them it took me 13 years, they were like, what? Like they couldn't believe it. So I had to explain, I was raising a family and it was just a hobby and all this stuff. But so it took me 13 years to write this book. I'm so happy to have it out in the world right now, and I'm working on the sequel. So
that's so exciting. So I have to ask 2 questions based on what you were saying. So y'all like board games. What's a favorite family board game?
Okay, so my favorite is Ticket to Ride in all of its variations. I love Ticket to Ride, but my family gets so mad because they're tired of it. And so they're like, can we play something else besides Ticket to Ride? But they like, let's see, what do they like? They used to really love Monopoly, but I think they've realized that it's too easy for one person to just kind of run away with the whole thing. Once you get all the railroads, that's it. That person's probably going to win. And my family's also big on, they don't like games of chance. They want to make sure that there's some strategy involved so they know that they earned that win, kind of thing. And my kids, or actually my husband too, everybody's very competitive. So there's usually a lot of yelling and, it gets very boisterous when we're playing games. So how about you guys? Do you guys play board games too?
We're kind of all over the place. My daughter really loves Clue. I think they're going to correct me later if I'm wrong. Our son is more on the strategy games. So Settlers of Catan is one.
Oh, yeah.
Risk. Yeah. I have never played Ticket to Ride, but I've wanted to.
Oh, no, you have to get Ticket to Ride. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That's great. Let's see, what would be my favorite? I don't even know what my favorite would be. I've always loved Life, and I know that that's like a silly game, but it's just like a fun game that I remember from as a kid, and it's just kind of followed me all the way up. But Yes.
Yes.
And Scrabble has special memories
I
because I
love
played that with
Scrabble.
my grandparents.
I love
So,
Scrabble. And I used to
yay.
like playing chess with my kids until they started beating me. And then I don't like to play it anymore now because they beat me all the time.
True. I can relate to that. Oh, that's great. And so my other question, because you talked about how much you like to read and you really like kids' books, all the ranges of age ranges and everything. So do you have a particular book that maybe you've read recently that really has stood out, or one that's just kind of been a favorite for a long time?
This is going to be, well, okay, very cliche because I just really loved the Harry Potter books. And I
Yeah,
know that they're sort of, passe and it's,
they're so good.
I feel like they were almost too popular for somebody to say, for especially an author to say, oh yeah, the Harry Potter books are my favorite books. And okay, they're maybe not my favorite books, but I just really loved them. I loved the complexity of the plot. Like I would
Mhm.
love to sit down with J.K. Rowling and say, did you plot this whole thing before you started writing like all 7 books? How did you do this?
Yeah.
Because it's just so intricate. But then all of the character arcs, and oh my gosh, Snape is my favorite character. My kids get so mad at me. And why do you like Snape? Well, I just do. But okay, other than Harry Potter, I love Kate DiCamillo. Like everything she
Yes.
writes, in my opinion, is just golden. She's
Mhm.
just, I think, a treasure,
Yeah.
for this generation. And I love Maurice Sendak. Where the Wild Things
Mhm.
Are was always one of my favorites. He also did the Little Bear books and uh oh, what's his face? Who did Stregonona? What's his name?
Oh, I know what you're talking
I'm
about. We've read
forgetting.
that. I don't
Uh,
remember his name.
Not Paolo.
Paolo does sound right.
It's why it's on
Mhm.
the tip of my tongue. I can't think of it. Um, Anyhow, he passed in the past few years, and he has a ton of books out there that I really like. Picture books, and so yeah, just there's so much that I like. The kids asked me in the presentations today, like, who was your inspiration? Which author? Which book? And there really wasn't one. It was just a collection of all of them because I just loved reading with my kids so much. And I wanted to be able to create magic like that kids could enjoy. So that was my inspiration.
I think that's the key. The magic aspect, I think, is what is
Yeah.
so beautiful and wonderful about children's literature, especially young adult literature, fantasy. I think always kind of captures that magic element, but there's magic in just normal life too. And I think that that's something that often gets better captured in children's literature than in adult
Right.
literature. And I love that.
Yeah. One of the kids asked me today, do you think you'd ever write YA? And I said, well, I don't think so. I said, there's so much drama and emotion and just sort of like deep stuff you have to get into when you write YA. And in middle grade, you don't have to do that. You don't have to go that deep. And so I kind of like it where middle grade is at. So another shocking thing to me from the visits today, Joy, is that those 6th graders, they're like all reading horror books. They're like, do you read
Oh,
horror?
wow.
Are you going to write horror? And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? Like Stephen King type stuff. 6th grade.
Wow.
I
Oh
don't
my
know. I guess
goodness.
times are just different than when you and I were growing up. I never, as a 6th grader, would have thought about reading Stephen King.
Oh,
And I
wow.
still don't. I think I would have nightmares.
That's true.
I don't know if that's
I
your
don't
thing,
like
but yeah, it's not
no, I
mine.
don't like horror. Now, I will say his psychological thrillers, I actually like. I'm not so much into the horror and that kind of stuff, but his psychological thrillers, I've read a few of them, and I can
Mhm.
see why he's the king. Like, just the way that he writes is just, I mean, it's incredible. It truly is.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not my cup of tea either.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, so kind of going off what the students asked you,
Mhm.
what did inspire your book?
So when I was a kid, one of my favorite, classic Disney movies was Peter Pan. I loved Peter Pan. There was something so, like you said, magical about that. And do you remember the little golden books? They had the
Yes,
little
I
golden
love,
spine. And okay,
yes.
so there was the little golden Peter Pan book, and then there was the
Mhm.
Disney movie, and I just, loved those. But then as I grew up, as an adult, I loved the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. There was just something
Yeah.
about pirates that just always intrigued me. Even though they had a kind of a bad reputation, there was just something about pirates that was intriguing to me. And So when I decided I wanted to write, and so I told the kids this whole evolution too of my writing. When I first sat down to write, I started writing picture books, and I really loved, I was into like rhyming, even though I didn't know how to do it properly. So I was writing, rhyming picture books. And I wanted to do a retelling of the Peter Pan story, but sort of with my own characters, but kind of, similar. And I read the kids some of those early verses, and yeah, they were just kind of cracking up. And then the story changed a few years later. It became more of an early chapter book, and then a few years later, it became more of, something like Magic Treehouse, or for a little bit older kid, until it eventually became the middle grade that it is today. So I read them bits from each of those different stages, and they were just like, wow. Yeah, they were surprised that a story could go through that many changes, I guess, over a period of time. But so my inspiration, Peter Pan, growing up, or I mean, as an adult, being fascinated with pirates. But then we have friends who live, or they have a summer home in Cape Cod. They invited us one summer to come and visit. And that's when I learned about Black Sam Bellamy and his story. He was a real pirate back in the 1700s during the golden age of piracy. And there's an archaeologist out there. He's not an archaeologist. What's the name for it? It's not a scavenger, but somebody who does like underwater exploration. His name's Barry Clifford. He searched for and found artifacts from the Widow, which sunk off the coast of Cape Cod, and wrote a book about the whole, process of finding it, and interlaced his story with the story of Black Sam Bellamy, and how he was born in England but came to America, how he became a pirate, all of that. And so when I was writing my story, I knew that it was going to have a pirate in it, but I didn't know who. And when I learned this story, I thought, okay, well, Black Sam Bellamy, he's my guy. So he became part of the story, and it just evolved from there. So
that is so cool. And so I'm actually going to flop these next two questions, because the research question goes along perfectly with what you just said. So I love research, and I know that you do, because we've had some conversations about this. What was the most surprising bit of information you discovered while researching for this book? And is there anything that you learned through your research that either you didn't include in the book, or maybe it didn't even make it into your author's note? Because I love that, by the way. I love author's notes at the back of books that give the historical details and the research.
I had so much fun doing that part of it, because I love research, and I love history, and I love that I have a fiction book, but that I'm able to bring some nugget of truth to the story and to share it with the kids. And so, like you said, I have the author's note, which talks about pirates, and the Widow, which was a slave ship. So it touches on slavery a little bit, and lighthouses, and this stained glass sundial that I found. And it was, all of my research was fascinating. And I even took a couple of trips to Cape Cod so that I could see things in person and take pictures and visit museums and things like that. But I think the most surprising thing was just what I learned about pirates, because you do get the idea from contemporary fiction and movies and things like that pirates are kind of, they're the bad guy. They stole from people, and they kill people, and, they were just always up to no good, which is true for the most part, but they were acting out of social grievances at the time. So a lot of them were oppressed. They were from the bottom rungs of society. They had worked on like merchant marine ships where they were badly abused by their captains. And so this was a way, they were kind of like Robin Hoods. They were escaping the oppression and stealing from the rich to, take care of themselves. Now, again, I'm not condoning that action, but when you understand that, they were acting out against grievances, and that they ran a very democratic ship. Like they voted on everything. Everybody had a vote in everything. And the captain was elected democratically. It was, it was fascinating to learn how the pirates lived. And Black Sam Bellamy was known as a gentleman pirate, because there's no record of him ever having killed anybody or treated anybody, badly. So, yeah.
Gentleman pirate. I love that.
Yeah, I know, right?
Who knew? That's so special.
I know. Yeah. And as far as did I leave anything out, or is there anything that I didn't put in there? I don't think so. I think I tried to include, everything that I discovered. Now, certainly I could have expounded on every single one of those things more, but I tried to, keep it somewhat condensed. So I didn't want it to ramble on forever and ever. But yeah, I think I did touch on everything that was important to the story. So
That's Yeah, it is hard because when you research, you come up with so many amazing things and you want to include it all, but you just
mhm.
can't. So that's where those notes at the back really do help. You can share those things without having them in the story sometimes, or not as much as you might want. So as you were writing this book, did your characters take you on some surprise twists and turns, or did you have the end figured out from the beginning?
So, Joy, this is, I think that anybody who listens to this or watches this who is an author is going to be like, are you an idiot? Because because I told you that it started out as a rhyming picture book and it evolved slowly into what it is today. I didn't plot it because it just didn't, that's not what I set out to do in the beginning. And because it was a slow evolution, it just changed again gradually over time. And because of that, so I'm what, they call a pantser in the industry, right? Somebody who just kind of writes by the seat of their pants and just kind of waits to see what happens with the characters and doesn't plot ahead of time. And that's all well and good, I think, for some people and for some types of books, but I don't recommend it for time travel. And I tell you, I got into several just like, oh my gosh, I've written myself into a corner. How am I going to get out of this? Like, what am I going to do now? So that was very challenging. I definitely will not write like that ever again, at least for these next two, which are, sequels, a sequel and then the third, which also have the time travel in them, because you can't, you have to make sure that you follow the rules. Oh, that's another thing too, the rules of time travel. I'll get back to that in a second. You have to make sure that you follow the rules of your time travel in order for it to make sense. But in order for it to make sense, you have to plot it ahead of time. Otherwise, you're going to write yourself into a corner like I did. So I've already plotted and started writing the sequel, but I also have the third book plotted in my head just so that I know, what's going to happen so I don't get myself in trouble again. But getting back to the rules of time travel. So this is one of the things I asked the kids. I said, do you think that time travel has rules, and what are some of those rules? And so they were shouting out all kinds of things. And let me tell you, some of these kids were really smart too. They were talking about things that were like adult language, like quantum physics and, all this stuff. And I don't know if they're getting that from like these Marvel movies that have, time travel now, and like, what are they called? Multiverses, that kind of thing. But they had all this lingo that I didn't even understand. And it was funny. But I told them, I said, I watched tons of movies that have time travel in them, kids' movies and adult movies. I read books. I read articles on time travel. And the thing that I discovered is that because time travel is not possible, there's always going to be no matter what movie or book you read, you're going to be like, well, wait a minute. Do you know what I mean? Because there's no perfect way to do it because it doesn't exist. There's always going to be that sort of conundrum of, well, that's not possible because of, this. And so I explained to the kids that finally my realization was, look, somebody at some point is going to be like, they're going to read this book and go, yeah, but wait a minute. And all you can do is make your time travel rules, stick to your own rules, and that's all you can do, because there's always going to be that, yeah, but wait about it, or wait a minute, what about, this? Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. It's difficult.
Well, and I think anything like time travel, anything fantastical, anything magical, there has to be that willing suspension of disbelief, which, is if you're an English major or you had any English literature class, you heard that, right? So there has to be the story has to be strong enough to where you're okay with being like, you know what, I get that that doesn't 100% make sense, but oh my
Right.
goodness, this story's so good.
Yes. No, that's exactly right. Yeah. Great way to put it.
Yeah. But that's great. I love that you said, have your own rules and like make sure that you're consistent with your rules. That's super important. Good advice. So you, like you mentioned, you're a mom. So did any of your kids inspire or influence the story or your characters in any way?
No, but my oldest, who's now 26, she's been my beta reader all along. She has read several versions of the story, and she's been my cheerleader and the person that I call up and go, Grace, what am I going to do about this? And we're reading several versions of something to help me figure things out. And so, yeah, she was a big help in just working through some of these issues. And everybody in my family has read it, and they all really liked it. And I know you asked too about favorite
Favorite
scenes,
scenes, yes.
but I think all of their favorite scenes contain spoilers. So
Oh,
I
I wondered
can't tell
about
you what their favorite scenes were,
that.
but there's some like, what? Moments in the story that are, yeah, I didn't see that coming. And I think they really like those scenes. So,
Oh,
yeah.
well, all readers love that. Those are the best
Yeah, no, I do
scenes.
too. I do too. Yeah.
That's so great. And I love that opportunity that you have to include your daughter in this journey. That's super cool. And that she like has given you feedback all along the way. And that's super special for you guys to share.
Yeah, it was nice. And she's a good writer herself. In fact, we read some of the same books. And
Mhm.
in fact, oh gosh, she's probably read more books than I have. She's a very prolific reader, but she read one book, and I'm not going to say the name of it or the author because we hated it, specifically
No.
the ending. We both read it. We both hated the ending. And she said, I could write a better ending than that. It's kind of like in a state of anger or frustration or whatever. And I said, well, Grace, you should just rewrite the ending. And so I'll be darned if she didn't enjoy. It was like I was sobbing. She wrote such a
Oh.
fabulous ending to this book that we hated. And so I said, Grace, you need to start writing yourself or get into editing or publishing or something. You need to be involved in this world somehow, because she really is um, yeah, good at writing and just recognizing what makes a good story, and with as much as she's helped me and everything. So yeah.
So cool. And so many people have gotten their starts in a similar fashion. Like a lot of people started out writing fan fiction. Well, you started out with the inspiration of retelling Peter Pan. I know a
Mhm.
lot of people kind of get started that way of, let me write this better or let me retell this in a different way because I loved it so much or something like that. And I think that that is a fantastic way to start. And I mean, someone very wise said, there's nothing new under the sun. So, we aren't necessarily, as authors, coming up with something completely brand new. There's inspiration all over the place. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
oh, that's so cool. I want to meet your daughter now.
Aw.
Yay. All right, so like you mentioned, you're working on the sequel, and
Mhm.
you've got that third book in your mind. So, can you
Right.
give us any non-spoiler teasers, possibly, or tell us something interesting about your writing process? You've already told us several interesting things, but if there's anything else,
Well, let's see. I mean, there's still the time travel in both of the sequels. But I don't know if that there's anything that I can share without spoiling anything at this point.
yeah. That's always
And
the
then,
biggest challenge.
yeah, it is. And oh my gosh, Joy, I almost screwed up with the kids when I was talking to
Oh
them earlier. I almost blurted out something, and then I caught myself at the last second. No,
no,
don't say anything.
I've done
It
that
is hard.
too.
It is hard to talk about the story because you know the story like backwards and forwards, and you're used to talking about it with people maybe who have read it
Right.
and are familiar with what's going on. And so it just seems natural to just like mention certain things, but
Mhm.
you have to be careful not just shout out those spoilers. And then in terms of my writing process, yeah, I mean, I already touched on the whole plotting versus pantsing and how I'm going to be doing it better going forward.
Yeah, that's so
Um,
great.
And yeah, I don't think there's anything else about my process really that's unique or different or interesting. Or I do have a storyboard. I don't
Oh,
know.
that's
I don't
cool.
think everybody uses a storyboard, but I
Yeah.
felt that it was necessary because of the time travel, and I needed to keep track of certain threads.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked up, how to do a storyboard. It's something that's used a lot with like movie makers,
Yeah.
screenwriters.
Yeah.
And so I had this great big cork board. It's enormous and it's got all these index cards on it. And I took a picture of it and included it in the slideshow for the students today. And I only showed it to sixth grade because fourth and fifth, I had different slideshows and I was talking about, different aspects of it with them. But sixth grade, that slide came up and I said, does anybody know what this is? And somebody shouted out right away, it's a storyboard. I was like, wow, that's great. Yes, it is a
So
storyboard.
cool.
Um, and I'm a visual learner and
Mhm.
just a visual processor. So I need to have things like that. I have an inspiration board up there, the storyboard. I have to have stuff like that around to sort of keep focused and yeah.
So with the book, so we've talked a little bit about the pirate. I'm kind of tossing this one at you, but the main character, the girl,
Mhm.
can you tell us a little bit about her and like about what age is she in this book, and then how much time is she older? Is she like what are we looking at with the next one?
Wow, that's a good question because she's 12 in this book. So I'll do that part first. She's 12 in this book. And my whole thing was I didn't want this to be Harry Potter or Percy Jackson, where each book is a year later, because
Mhm.
then by the third book, she's 14. 14 is now you're having to deal with hormones and, budding relationships and things that I just don't want to go there.
Right.
So, okay, how can I keep her 12 or maybe 13? I'll go to 13 if I have to. But also do two more books. So I've had to rework the storyline a little bit so that they're the things that happen. So I'm trying to be careful with my words so that the things that happen sooner rather than later so that she's, 12 and maybe 13 by the third book.
Okay. So see, you guys just have to read the book, right?
Oh, funny. And one of the students asked me, she said, oh, how did she phrase that question? Um, oh, I can't remember now. Never mind. It'll come back to me later. What was the second part of the question that you had asked me at the
Oh,
beginning?
well, your writing process, we've kind of already covered that, and just any non-spoiler teasers or something interesting about your writing process with the sequel and the third book.
Um, yeah, no. Oh no, you asked me about the main character, Mirabell.
Oh, yes,
So
that's right. Sorry, I went
she,
off script.
oh
I
no,
forgot
that's
I went
okay.
off script.
But I knew there was something missing there. So Mirabell she finds out, and this is not really a spoiler, you find this out pretty quickly. She finds out that she's the direct descendant of Black Sam Bellamy. And so that's how she gets involved with him. And then he's cursed with immortality. So he's still alive in, 2017 when the story takes place. And they team up because of a reason that I won't disclose. And go on this treasure hunt with her two friends as well and a couple of other people. And then there's a bad guy. And so, yeah, she's a fencer. If you notice on the cover, she's holding a sword in her hand. So she's a fencer. And I got the idea for that. It's kind of a twofold reason. My husband was a collegiate fencer on a national championship team. And so I knew a lot about fencing from him. And I mean, pirates, they have swords, right? They're sword play and sword fights and all that. And so I thought, well, this would be a good way to tie the two together or, tie her to him other than just being his descendant. She's a fencer, so she's got a little bit of sword play experience. Not quite the same, but it worked in nicely to the story.
I love it when a plan comes together.
Yes.
So, and I have a couple more questions, but I am going to toss this out. If anybody has any questions, y'all are free to put those in the chat. I'll ask her those in a minute. And I am giving away this autographed copy. So we'll probably do it a little different. So if you guys are watching the replay, comment with some questions. We will get those answered for you, and you'll also receive an entry to win. So there you go. You like that? I'm all about giving away stuff. So let me go back a couple of questions for you to kind of wrap up. But are there any particular challenges that you faced in writing this book? I know you mentioned how you started out as like pantsing through it, and that kind of fell apart a little bit for you, and so you've taken a different route with these next books. But was there anything else that was a particular challenge?
So I think just because I started writing when my kids were little, and it started off as a hobby, and I really didn't know what I was doing. And so I tried to explain this to the kids today too at the presentation, that when I started writing, I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know the right way to do it, if that makes sense. And I explained to them that, look, writing is a craft. It's something you have to learn. It's not something that you're just born knowing how to do. Well, maybe some people are, but not me. And so all those years of, while I was raising my kids, trying to learn the craft of writing. So going to conferences and reading books and watching videos and just reading, keeping up with just reading myself, because the best way to become a good writer is to read, right? And so doing all of that while raising kids and trying to write, it was just, it was challenging because it was a lot to try and do together. And that's why it took me 13 years to get this book published.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a lot. And you were so right. This is something that it is a craft, and we're going to always learn. And I think in some ways that's something that I do love about it, because I love to learn. And so I know like I'm always going to be learning something new, and I'm hopefully going to be getting better, every time I write something new. But the best way to do it is, like you said, reading, but also just diving in and writing. Like you can't figure out your process without doing that. That's one of the things that I tell people all the time is, if somebody tells you there's only one way to write a book, or one way to do a certain aspect of getting ready to write a book, or whatever it may be, that's not true. They're trying to sell you something because every writer is different. Yeah.
Right. And that actually reminds me of something else. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't interrupt, but it triggered something that I remembered. And that is, I did get to a point, because I was learning the craft and I was watching and consuming so much stuff, that I got to a point with my story where it was like too many cooks in the kitchen, because I was trying to change my story to please everyone and everything that I was reading. Like, okay, this article says you have to do this, and this book says you have to do this. And well, this podcast that I just listened to, this person says you have to do this. And so I was trying to do it all, until I realized you shouldn't do it all, because then it doesn't help your story. It actually hurts your story, because I think I needed to get to a point where I was confident enough in my writing ability and in what I had written and the story itself, the plot, to just go with my gut and what felt right and what I wanted to do, and hope that it was good enough. Yeah. I even told the kids about the feedback I got from my developmental editor. She suggested something, sort of a big change in the story that I did not want to do. And she said, I really think Sam Bellamy is about 26 years old in the story. And I don't know if I never say that, but you can tell just from reading it that he's an adult, right? He's not a kid. But she said, I really think that he needs to be a kid pirate, the same age as your other kids. And I was like, I can't do that. Then it wouldn't be my story. It would be somebody else's story then, because I just thought that was too big of things, something I wasn't willing to compromise on, and something that was just, it would have changed my story too much, and I wouldn't have been happy with that change. So I stuck to what I felt was the right thing to do, and I think I made the right choice.
Yeah, that's good. You have to listen to your gut.
Yes.
So one last question before I'm going to have you let everybody know the best way to find out more about you and the book and all of that. But what would be, and you've mentioned a couple of things along the way, so if you were to talk to a young aspiring author, what would be the first piece of advice that you would give them?
So it would be twofold. Keep reading in the genre that you want to write in and don't give up. I had rejections from 52 agents before I decided to self-publish. And I told the kids today too, like a lot of people at that point would have given up and said, well, maybe I wasn't meant to do this, or maybe it just wasn't meant to be. And I wasn't satisfied with not being able to do this just because I kept getting the door closed in my face. And so persevere and don't give up.
Oh, that's great. So tell everybody, and I'll put these links in for everybody to get to, but what's the best way to follow you on social media, and where is your website? And anything else you'd like to tell us?
I'm opening up the back of my book because I don't have it memorized. Isn't that terrible? No, my website is carigaleziewski.com. Should I spell it? Or
I'll put it in the thing. Okay. Yeah, so everybody can spell. Yes. I just
That's
say it one more time because I've been like, I know I am going to butcher it if I try to say it. So say it one more time.
Oh, yeah. No, it's Cari Galeziewski.
Galeziewski. I can do this now. See, I've got it now. I've heard you say it enough. I'm going to do it right from now.
You know what? Funny thing about that, I'm going to just throw this in real quick too, because I worked for a teacher's aide for several years, a while back. And the adults that I would come into contact with, they could never pronounce my name, even after they would hear me say it. The kids, they heard it once and they would say it perfectly every time after that. Every time I'd be walking down the hall. Hi, Mrs. Galeziewski. Like they would say it perfectly after hearing it one time, and the adults couldn't do that. And I just found that fascinating, right? Funny. Isn't that fascinating? The kids hear it one time and they get it right. Oh. But okay, social media. Let me see. Put my glasses back on here. So Facebook and Instagram are both carigaleziewski.author.
Okay, perfect. And I will put those in here. And thank you so much for being with us, Cari.
Thank you, Joy. I really had a nice time talking to you.